That's talking about as we stand before God, we are all equal. Okay? If I'm at a local church and I'm not an elder and I'm conversing with an elder, we are equal before God. I'm free to talk to and even attempt to maybe instruct an elder in something that I feel that maybe I have some more information about or a better position. Okay? But that is not the same thing that there is not a hierarchy of roles. Okay? And you see,
well, as much as I agree with Darth on that one subject matter, obviously he's just speaking from the Bible. There's only so much Darth that people can handle, right? Right, Barth? Come on, Barth.
Say that again.
Oh God, Barth?
So much.
No, I'm asking. Yes, Darth Dawkins. Darth Dawkins.
Yeah, there's only so much Darth Dawkins. Oh, are you the crazy Chrissy that I dealt with before?
Oh, is it? Why does it really take you that long? You go from hating me to just straight trolling.
No, I don't. Well, first of all, let's make it very clear. I don't hate you, but I do have.
I don't know, Darth. You put things in back channels.
Chrissy,
what did you say to Jeff Lebowski?
Chrissy, if you interrupt me one more time while I'm speaking, I will eject you from the room. Okay? Now,
I'm good. I'll put myself down in the audience.
Okay, goodbye. No, you're gone from the room. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
She never changes her way. I don't hate her, but I do have utter contempt for her. There's a difference between hate and despise. Okay? I don't hate her. I feel sorry for her. But she is a contemptuous person. A contemptuous person.
Do you love everyone, Darth?
I try to. I wish I don't want to see anyone go to hell. But you see, I don't equate loving people that it's mutually exclusive with having contempt for certain people's persistent, bad behavior and attitudes.
Yeah, we don't have to like someone, but we do have to want the best.
Look, I'm a parent. There are some people here that are parents. You can equally love your children and not stop loving your children, but actually have maybe, let's say, contempt or have disgust for the way they have an attitude or behaving. Okay, it's not mutually exclusive.
No, yeah, we don't have to like everyone, but we do have to love them. If we want the best.
There are plenty of good parents who have not changed one iota in their love for their children, but who can and will be contemptuous of their children's attitudes, mindset, or conduct. It's that simple. And Chrissy is an obnoxious, non-disciplined person. She just doesn't know how to control her mouth. You see, when I ask if she's the same person that I've dealt with before, immediately she goes from 0 to 60 to being obnoxious as she usually is. Okay, so do we have any atheists in the audience who would like to come up and explain in non-double talk, non-line ways why you hold to the position that there is no God? Do we have any atheists with the spinal fortitude? See, they only have a pair of testicular balls, if that's redundant, when they're in atheist-dominated and controlled rooms. Amy, would you like to come up and tell us why there's no God? No, I doubt that you will. See, this is why I say atheists, for the most part, are gutless cowards. Because they resort to lying, obfuscating, trolling, rabbit trailing. Because they can't... And look at that. Haiti leaves very quickly when I called her out and invited her up. Isn't that amazing? She leaves.
Was it Haiti?
Yeah, it was Haiti.
Have you ever talked to her?
Oh yeah, several times. She's a clown. You cannot choose any of your beliefs whatsoever, which is ridiculous in my view.
They say this, and they're like, I can't choose my beliefs. It sounds so ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. It is ridiculous. Now, equally ridiculous is the notion, because people do choose certain things to believe.
But like, I can't choose to believe that I'm not wearing socks, right? Like, I'm just
Okay,
wondering.
stop. What you just said is not a defeater for the opposite of dochastic involuntarism.
Yeah, I'm just asking clarification. I'm not.
Yeah. Okay. So look. Let me just say this. Right. I am by no means an expert on this. I know enough to be conversant and to give my opinion. Dochastic involuntarism, as I am familiar with it, is the notion that you cannot choose any of your beliefs. Okay? Now, the position that is different from that would be the position of dochastic voluntarism, which means you can choose all your beliefs. Well, most people who are familiar with that think that that's equally absurd, and I agree with that. But you see, it's not a dichotomous situation, because we have the alternative that we can choose some of our beliefs. From a biblical point of view, God has ordained that we human beings, through a process of neurological development, that we have a certain fundamental or foundational beliefs of which we cannot voluntarily jettison. Okay? And I think most people would agree with that, whether they hold to a biblical point of view or not, that there are certain fundamental beliefs that you cannot rid yourself of. But there are certain things that people choose to believe certain things because it's conducive or commensurate with other things that they would like to be true. Okay? So the idea that we do not have the ability to choose any singular beliefs whatsoever, consciously or subconsciously or at a lower consciousness, is ridiculous. Okay?
If that were true, like, what would even be the point of life? Like, if you can't.
No. If dochastic involuntarism were true, it would pretty much put us in the camp of automatons, in my view.
Right, yeah.
And granted, everybody understands that, yeah, there are certain beliefs that you just can't choose not to believe. Like you said, I can't choose to believe right now I'm not wearing socks. Okay?
I don't know, but if you talk to flat earthers, it makes me think people could believe anything.
Well, first of all, most of those people are trolls.
That's true.
They don't actually believe what they're saying. They're just doing to yank people's chains, right?
You don't run in the circle that I do. Most of them, the ones I encounter, are legit. They're just.
Well, my view, okay, is that only a minority of these people actually hold to this position, because you couldn't actually intellectually hold to this position, because it's without any intellectual support to it.
Well, scripture can be read in a flat Earth from a flat Earth point of view.
That is
the circle of the Earth.
Mac. That is ridiculous. If that were true, then we could see in the history of those people who have theological expertise in terms of biblical theology, we would find a certain modicum of representatives of a flat Earth, but they're rare, if ever, to find. Okay?
Is that not an appeal to authority, though?
No, absolutely not. It's an appeal to statistics. An appeal to authority would be Well, we landed on the moon because my dentist said so. Okay? If I appealed to the validity of a certain historical situation, and I made an appeal to a historian, somebody who was a credentialed, employed historian, okay, that would not be an appeal to authority. Okay. Now, that might be fallacious in the sense that the authority person is not necessarily true, but he's certainly qualified as a so-called expert. Okay.
Yeah, I find that the Catholic Church tends to do that a lot. They tend to rely on church fathers and councils for their theology, and then they just cite them as authority, and then say that's not an appeal to authority because they're actually authorities. But that's where.
Well, also, you have to be careful. Sometimes people play fast and loose with the citation of church fathers, and when we look up certain statements, they're not unequivocally stating what they're saying they did. Okay. The bottom line is when I talk about flat earthers, I'm appealing to, from my perspective, somebody can be free to disagree, the statistics as I see it, the stats. Okay, that a person of normal intelligence and has basically informed, it is ludicrous to adopt the position that there is a good and sufficient reason to believe the earth is flat. Right? Now, if what I just said is true, then I think, in my biased opinion, what follows from that is that the vast majority of flat earthers are just a bunch of trolls. Right? They're just taking this position to mess with people's heads, simply just to be a contrarian. Right? And for those who are not, and I'm sure we would agree that there are some people who do that, the people who hold to this are nuts.
Or they're biblical literalists who are interpreting differently the scripture.
No, they can't. No, the issue is not, in all due respect to you, it's not that they're biblical literalists. They're bastardizing the text. And if they were truly being biblical literalists, why is it that we fail to see any kind of representation, okay, in terms of numbers, of biblical theologians throughout the ages, or even within the last 200 years, 100 years, or even contemporarily, that advocate that the Bible teaches a flat earth? Show them to me. You might
Josh Bowen believes it. Josh Bowen states that.
Okay, yeah, okay. Josh Bowen is a clown. Okay, all right. He can't even defend atheism. Now, first of all, he's not a biblical theologian. He's an Assyriologist.
But he knows what the language says, and he knows what the
No. Listen to me. If he says the Bible is explicitly clear as espousing a flat earth, he's lying.
Did he say that? Did he actually?
Yeah, he said that in numerous conversations with me.
Okay, well then he's obviously lying. He couldn't possibly say that and believe that, knowing it's true. Because if it was crystal clear, okay, then what we would most certainly find is a greater population of biblical theologians would affirm that's what the Bible says. But we don't find that, do we?
Well, he doesn't comment on the theology of it. He just says that's what the language, that's what the text.
Okay, listen to me. Do you know how many times even people with PhDs have made a claim about the biblical language and they're bastardizing the text?
No, I wouldn't know.
Yeah, well, they have. I've seen this a number of times. So when somebody says the Hebrew says, right, sometimes they may be spot on, and other times they're exaggerating or they're embellishing. Okay? So, like for example, in Ezekiel, I think it's 14, in certain translations, it impugns God, let's say, deceive, where God says he's deceiving the prophet. And somebody says, well, that's the Hebrew word. But when you actually go and study the underlying Hebrew, and you look at cross-section of commentaries, especially those who are oriented toward the original language, you find that's not the case. Okay? So you have to understand, first of all, Josh Bowen is not somebody who we would call a biblical theologian. He has a PhD in Assyriology. Okay? Look, here's a guy who's written the so-called 2 books, An Atheist Guide to the Old Testament, and he got annihilated in a very polite and cordial conversation, asking him to give a rational account of his atheism, and he couldn't. He fared far worse than 15-year-olds had done defending atheism, okay, when I had an encounter with him. When I encountered him a second time, okay, in a forum on Discord on a stage where I had no powers of moderation, and I came up and I asked him a question, he outright refused to engage in a second dialogue, and when questioned why, his statement was, "I don't like your attitude."
Wow.
Okay, so Josh Bowen, I forget what his master's degree was in. I think he went to Capital Bible Seminary and he did study Hebrew. But even people who, well, let me give you an example. Okay, there is an expert in Greek named Dan Wallace. And he's somebody who I have the utmost respect for. Right? He's an expert in New Testament documents and fragments and copies. He gave a brief commentary on Acts 13:48, giving an interpretation of it. But he was biased by his Calvinistic leanings when he gave the interpretation of the text in reference to referencing the Greek. When I did my own study on it, what I found out was he was so biased by his Calvinism. His Calvinism biased him to not accurately represent the underlying Greek in the verse. Okay, the Greek in contention was, "and all who had been appointed to eternal life believed." The word "appointed" there can also be equally translated as "all who were disposed to." Now, the grammatical construction with which it's given in the Greek can be in 2 different types of, I'm trying to remember what the word, declensions, or however they say it in the Greek. Okay, it can either be, it can either be passive, or I can't remember what the other one is. Right? I spoke to somebody who grew up speaking fluent Greek, who's fluent in biblical Greek, who's a Calvinist, and I asked him about the underlying Greek in question, and he affirmed to me it doesn't have to be one or other, but given the context of the passage, it should be understood passively. In other words, that the disposal or appointment toward eternal life was the persons themselves doing it and not an external agent. But you see, Dan Wallace, who's an expert in Greek, was biased because of his theological disposition, rather than squarely dealing with the underlying Greek. Okay? So if even a Greek scholar at times can make a mistake, and by the way, if I got into a conversation of the Greek New Testament with him, I would be made a fool of. I mean, he's an expert on it. But even he made a basic mistake. So we have somebody who is not an Old Testament scholar, okay? He's an Assyriologist, and he tells you that the underlying Greek, the underlying Hebrew means a flat earth. He's playing fast and loose with the text, okay?
And that's why sometimes okay.
So then, then an atheist.
If what he's saying is true, if the Hebrew is clear that in certain passages it's indicating representing a flat earth, why don't we see more than maybe 1 or 2 outliers out there within the field of biblical literalism that point this out when they don't?
Well, then the atheist would turn around and say, why do we not see creationist biologists, other than a few fringe folks, saying that evolution isn't true? Like they could turn that back on you and say, why do we not see that?
No. First of all, when we're talking about biologists who are Christians, I think what you're making is a mistaken conflation there, because there's a distinction between somebody who is a biblical theologian, somebody who is a PhD in that area and has earned their living off of teaching this, versus somebody who just happens to be a Christian and is a biologist. That's an apples to orange comparison. Okay. Now,
No, I was speaking about
you. Listen. Well, you have to understand this when it comes to professing Christians, right? Even within the field of biology, we do not have a monolith of people within the in biology. They say, "Oh yeah, evolution is an absolute fact." You tend to have it divided up into thirds, okay? Where like a third of them have doubts as to whether it was true. There are people who are middle of the road, who think it may be true, might not be true, but may lean toward it's true. And then you have like a third that are adamant that it does. This idea that the view on evolution is monolithic is false. Okay. The bottom line is, I don't take Josh Boland seriously, right?
He's just trying to sell books to atheists. So he's like a con man, essentially.
No. I think you're being unfair to Josh Bowen, okay? I will criticize Josh Bowen where I think he deserves it, but I won't criticize or criticize him. I don't think he's a con man. I think he nominally held to biblical faith, and then, given certain circumstances in his life, he abandoned what was his profession of faith and decided to become an atheist, right? And he's just using what knowledge he has of Hebrew to not accurately represent the biblical text. Tell me why in any of these particular texts. Show me from an array of commentaries where they say, well, yeah, it could clearly mean a flat Earth. It doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, what I've seen from Josh Bowen, I think he...
Excuse me for interrupting. Show me one verse in the English or the Hebrew where it's unequivocally clear, or a strong case can be made that the biblical author is attempting to convey a flat Earth. Show me one verse.
Matthew 4:9, when the devil takes Jesus up to the tallest mountain and he could see all the kingdoms of the world, he wouldn't have a line of sight. He wouldn't have a line of sight on a flat Earth, or he would have a line of sight on a flat Earth.
Are you being serious, or are you joking?
You asked me to find a verse, and I could proffer that one, or in Isaiah.
First of all, you're making the mistake. Okay, that even let's say we in the passage we grant that he brought Jesus to a high place. That even, how should I put this to you? Even if the Earth were flat, given the limitations of human vision, you couldn't see all the kingdoms of the world. So he took him to a high place, and then he made we could say, let me ask you this. Can we rule out that when he took Jesus to a high place, from that high place he then made a manifestation or a vision of the kingdoms of the world?
I believe I can't rule it out, but I can imagine that they would have mentioned that.
You're not understanding. It's equally as ludicrous. Let me look. It's equally ludicrous. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that we all accepted a flat Earth, right? It would just be as equally ludicrous that you could, through human vision alone, show all the kingdoms of the world, even with a flat Earth. There would have to be some overriding of natural human ability in human sight. Okay? And so, given that Satan is a being of incredible power, he can produce manifestations that is above and beyond anything that we could imagine. So it's not inconceivable that he could provide Jesus from a high place. This idea that he needed to bring Jesus up to a high place in order to see. It just says he brought him up to a high place.
Well, I just follows from being in a high place.
Yeah.
Otherwise, why wouldn't he go underground and do it?
The point
Or in a secret bunker.
the point is, it's equally ludicrous from a low place as well as a high place to think that you could see all the kingdoms of the world by normal human eyesight. Both positions are equally ludicrous. So in order for Satan to show Jesus the vision of the world, he would have to engage in some type of manifestation that is above and beyond normal human capabilities. Okay? All right, let me ask you this question. Suppose you watched a documentary of the prevailing and contemporary kingdoms of the world. Is that possible?
Naturally.
No, it's not. Let me tell you why. It's because what you would be seeing was a facsimile of those kingdoms. You would be seeing something which was a visual representation of those domains, those kingdoms.
Oh, you're asking if I'm actually seeing them. Well, no, you're right.
Yeah, right. Okay, so if you watch the documentary, what you're going to see are facsimiles of or visual representations of those domains. So this idea that in Matthew 4, as you said, Matthew 4, that this
Matthew 4,
yeah, this is, with no disrespect to you, it's ludicrous if somebody cites that as an example supporting a flag. It's ludicrous. It's not just ridiculous; it's ludicrous.
Yeah, so there's also the verse in Isaiah that describes, setting upon the circle of the earth. Well, yes, a sphere can be seen as a circle, but so can a table, a pizza, et cetera, et cetera.
Look, Mac, it's been common knowledge throughout much of the world, even going back several thousand years. It was easy for people back then, through studying certain things, including shadows, that the Earth is spherical.
Oh, I work with gyroscopes. I don't believe the science says that the Earth is flat. I work with gyroscopes. It can't work that way. But my point is, if we're to accept creationism, if we're to accept the flood...
Listen to me. Just hold on a second. Just hold that thought a second. I'm not trying to be interruptive or discourage you, okay? There's a scholarly book out there, not written by a Christian. It's called The Myth of the Flat Earth. And it was this idea that, especially represented throughout the Middle Ages, that there was widespread belief in a flat Earth. This is hysterically false.
I'm aware.
There may have been representation in certain artistic renditions around the world of a flat Earth, but you're not going to find any serious defense that there was widespread belief in a flat Earth.
In ancient Hebrew cosmology, it was widely known to be, or widely believed to be flat.
No, you're probably ancient Hebrew. No, that's simply incorrect. Okay, show me your sources.
Oh.
This is a common retort. Okay, the fact of the matter is that it's easy to discern that although in our locale the Earth seems flat, that the Earth, in terms of its size, would be spherical. Okay, it's easy to figure that out. Okay, the reason why people come to believe this crap is because there has been this myth of the flat Earth that has been prevalent. That belief in a flat Earth was widespread. It wasn't.
I didn't say it was widespread. I said that the ancient Hebrews believed it.
Good, show that to me. Give me your documentation.
Okay, I'll have to...
you talking about biblical Hebrew? Show me that.
Yeah. Okay, I'll have to do it another time.
Sure, okay. And by the way, it's really a moot point. The point is, here Josh Bowen is a guy who publishes, 2 Amazon books. And by the way, I should really go through those books and critique them. Where he, hold on a second. The fact that he so abysmally failed, and with no exaggeration, he abysmally failed to defend his atheism better than a 15-year-old. And I'm not trying to be funny here. And then when he's given another opportunity when he's asked to defend his atheism, he completely refuses to defend it by going, I'm not a philosopher. Well, guess what? I'm not a philosopher either, Josh Mullen. But you are somebody who, wears your PhD in Assyriology on your sleeve, and you come out and you regularly show up on Atheist Talking Head YouTube channels. This is not a guy I take seriously.
But that doesn't mean he's unqualified to talk about what the text actually, how the text is actually translated.
That's not what I said. In fact, he has an undergraduate degree, I believe, in Hebrew. But the fact that you do doesn't ipso facto mean what you're saying about the Hebrew is necessarily true. Look, do you understand that certain words or phrases in languages can have what I call semantic range? So let me ask you this question. If I said to you...
I'm familiar with the idea.
Okay, well, hold on a second, okay? In the past fall, or let me see, when was this? In the past fall or winter, my battery went out on me, so I called, AAA, and they came and they replaced it for me. I said to the driver, what is the charge on the battery? What does that mean?
Either that it was 2% or that it was without cost.
No. What did I mean?
Either that, what is the level?
Either, you're doing it again. I didn't ask you what could I have meant. I said, what did I mean?
Oh, it's unclear.
No. What it means is, the statement, unless qualified, can be ambiguous. And you see, this is what certain hacks do with Greek or Hebrew. Okay, even if they have a degree, they will opt for the semantic ambiguity of the phrase and adopt a possible meaning as that's what the text means. So the fact of the matter is, if I said, what is the charge on the battery, it could mean what's it going to be on my credit card? What's the electrical voltage on it? Right? Or if a father said to a child who wants to use the family computer for a book report, says, no one is using the computer right now. Is that descriptive or prescriptive? Okay? So this is what deceivers will do. They will take advantage of certain words or even phrases in an original language that, isolated out of context, can have a semantic ambiguity, and then they will insist that it is one thing over the other when they don't have the contextual support for it, because they're pushing an agenda. Okay? Like, have you ever heard where the Bible in the Old and the New Testament, it makes reference to the 4 corners of the earth?
I have. That was going to be my next one.
Okay, well, go ahead.
No, you get the idea.
Yeah, well, this is a bastardization of the text. When you actually look it up, for example, in the Greek, it actually means the 4 angles, okay? Which refers to the 4 basic directions that people are familiar with: north, south, west, and east, okay? This term can also be idiomatic. Like, for example, there's an article out there a couple of years ago, it appeared, that soccer has spread to the 4 corners of the earth. Now, is the person writing that insinuating a flat earth? Right? No, what he's talking about is he's using an idiomatic expression to convey an idea. And you see, this is a problem, that when If the biblical writers use certain idiomatic expressions, people play fast and loose with the text because they have an ideological or theological agenda. Okay? And this is in the case in order to impugn the God of the Bible. Okay? So somebody better have a rock solid case that a certain word has to mean flat earth rather than it can mean something else within a semantic range.
Mm. A lot of say just tell me what
And you see, we tolerate that notion, what I just said, in human discourse. But when it comes to biblical writers, oh no, when people have an agenda, they completely ignore the semantic range. Okay? That, like, for example, in the book of Acts, that slimy atheist, Dan Barker, will cite the 2 verses in Acts where it says they heard what the speaker was saying, and another passage recounting the same said they did not hear. But when you actually look up the Greek and you look up the context, what we see is that what the biblical Luke was conveying was they heard somebody speaking, but the words were not intelligible to them, but which were intelligible to Paul. Okay? How many times, and let me ask you this, Matt Gruber, how many times have you been talking to somebody on the phone, and because of the cellular connection or the sound quality, you could hear them talking, but what they were saying was not intelligible to you? Has that ever happened?
Yeah, it's like 80% of the time on Clubhouse.
Right, and have you ever said, I can't hear you?
Yeah, it just means I can't understand.
Right, so sometimes if you say to somebody, I can't hear you, it means there's dead air. Okay, which we've all said to somebody talking on a cell phone. I can't hear you. There's nothing there. Other times, that has the semantic range of meaning, I hear you speaking, I hear you enunciating, but it's not intelligible enough for me to delineate the individual words. And we truncate that by saying, I can't hear you. Okay? So this is the kind of fast and looseness that people like Josh Boland are dealing with when it comes to certain Hebrew words. Here's another example. In the Old Testament, in I believe it's either Deuteronomy or Leviticus, atheists will come and say that there's a passage which ordains that God sells a daughter into marriage after she's been raped. And when you look at the passage in the underlying Hebrew, it says nothing of the kind. The Hebrew word is the word for to take hold of. Okay. Now the Hebrew phrase or the wording that it means to take hold of can mean in certain context mean a forcible seizing of. In other situations, it can refer to a type of what we call a seduction. Okay? And when you look up the Hebrew, right, we look at the passage, it doesn't, the Hebrew and in when you look at a wide scope of English translations and you compare and contrast, what you find is it doesn't ipso facto have to mean an actual abduction or a seizing of a female without consent. Do you know what statutory rape is, Mac?
Yes. Sorry, I couldn't.
Okay. Have people been charged and gone to jail for statutory rape?
Naturally.
Okay. So sometimes rape, which is usually has the connotation of a forcible abduction without consent. But in certain situations, it can refer to a taking hold of a female with the female consenting. But we use the word rape. And we qualify that by saying statutory rape, right? But in statutory rape, there's not a forcible abduction without consent.
Well, it is in the sense that we don't honor the consent because it's
No,
by
but the point is this, right? In certain instances, right, the word to take hold of does not always mean a forcible subjugation without consent. And so in this particular passage, atheists will cite this as evidence that God is indicating that a daughter that was raped forcibly without consent could then be sold into marriage to the rapist. This is what they contend the Hebrew means. But any 13-year-old with a computer in front of them going onto Google or Bing and searching interlinearies and searching context and like it could easily see that is not what the Hebrew necessitates. Okay? Now, could the Hebrew phrase or wording, let's say,
Okay.
all right, I just switched my headset. Okay, so the Hebrew in the passage in question, to take hold of. But the question is, to what does that refer? Does it refer to a forcible subjugation without consent? Or does it mean to take hold of with consent, but was an inappropriate or unethical situation? Okay? And you see, atheists will say that the word and the phrasing must mean a forcible subjugation without consent, which it is not true when you actually look it up. Okay? So this is the analogy that I'm presenting is what Josh Bowen is doing.
Yeah, I caught that. Thanks, sir.
Well, if the Old Testament writers were clear, unequivocally clear, semantically clear, that they were indicating they believed in a flat earth, why is it that we don't see any type of representation within biblical theologians? Why? And the analogy to biologists who are professing Christians who do or don't accept evolution is a false analogy. You can find a sizable representation, certainly not a majority, certainly not a plurality of biologists who are Christians who reject the notion of evolution. But can you show me any sizable representation of biblical theologians who do this for a living, who have a PhD in the respective area, who say, yeah, the biblical Hebrew text is clear, it means a flat earth? Show that to me. It would be ground shaking if you could show it. Now, Josh Bowen, can he cite a biblical scholarship that recognizes this? And it doesn't even have to be true or false. The question is, does he cite that there are other people who are biblical and Hebrew Old Testament scholars who say, yeah, that's what it means. It means flat earth.
I know, could he? That's the thing.
No, I don't believe he can. Now, this is not a guy I trust when he's such a little weasel that when I ask him to give an account of his atheism, which is plastered on the covers of his book, An Atheist Guide to the Old Testament, I ask him to recapitulate his defense of atheism, and he completely cowards out. Okay? Now, and this is not a situation where one can claim, well, big, bad, mean, Dark Dawkins was going to bully Josh Bowen, because number one, I had over an hour-long interaction with Josh Bowen, where I had full and complete moderation powers, where never once did he complain about mistreatment. It was entirely cordial.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? And on the subsequent account, I had no powers of moderation at all, and the person who did have moderation powers was fake it till you make it, Tom jump the shark. Okay? So he completely wimps out in giving a rational defense of his atheism, but he goes on to publish a book, An Atheist Guide to the Old Testament. Now, so in other words, when I say to him, good, can you give a rational accounting of your atheism? And he said, no, I'm not going to talk to you. Well, why not? Oh, I don't like your attitude.
Well, I've pointed out to, like, I am of two minds on Dr. Josh, or I had been of two minds on Dr. Josh, in that I've asked him point blank in multiple conversations, like, why do you consider yourself an expert in the Old Testament when you neglect the most basic fact about it, i.e. its divine origin? You'd be like a flat earther physicist, or a I don't know, crystal healing geologist.
Well, that's just a given that he doesn't accept the divine origin because he's an atheist.
Well, are we to trust him as an expert in it if he doesn't believe it's in its divine origin? Isn't that a basic fact?
Look, he's not an expert in it, okay? His best level of expertise, let's take a look. Somebody, I'm too lazy to do it. Somebody Google what his undergraduate degree was. Was it in Hebrew?
I don't know, but we could also take like Bart Ehrman as an example. Like Bart Ehrman is trotted out as a New Testament scholar, but then I would ask Bart Ehrman, like, if you can't acknowledge the divine origin of Scripture, then how can we trust you?
Stop right there. You just made a mistake, okay? Again, in all due respect to you, he is not trotted out as a New Testament scholar. He is a New Testament scholar. As much of a critic as I am for Bart Ehrman, okay? And I'm nowhere near in his league, okay? There's no comparison. He is a New Testament scholar. He studied under Bruce Metzger, okay?
But given that he rejects the divine origin of Scripture, is he someone to be taken seriously?
He is to be taken seriously for two reasons, okay? As much as I disagree with him, number one, he's a human brain with a brain, okay? And he is a New Testament scholar. That doesn't mean we have to accept his conclusions as good, correct, or accurate. But you said he's trotted out as a New Testament scholar. No, he is a New Testament scholar.
I just mean that atheists use him to disprove the New Testament by trotting him out. That was.
Fine. So the point is, I say, good. Okay, so we have a New Testament scholar. Okay, so how about we have another New Testament scholar of equal credentials who disagrees with his conclusions? Where do we go from there? Listen, I'm not trying to nitpick here or browbeat you. This will be the last I'll say of it. I think it's inappropriate to say that he is, quote, trotted out because he is a New Testament scholar. Okay, he studied under one of the greatest minds in terms of textual criticism in the 20th century, Bruce Metzger. Okay, we can disagree with him and appeal to other people who are equally credentialed. You know, but the point is this idea that the biblical authors were promoting a flat earth is ridiculous.
I challenged Dr. Josh on the slavery thing, and I asked him, like, where are the slave markets or the slavers in ancient Israel? And he had, like, no response for me.
Yeah. So they didn't have the word for employees. The word slave could equally be servant.
Yeah, that's
okay. And there were different in the ancient world. Okay, there were different levels of servant. Those people who served for a period of time, whether it's a day, a week, a month, a year. Okay. And then there was what we call forced servitude. The idea that the quote unquote and see the word slave is inappropriate because of the history of slavery and especially slavery in the United States. People fail to understand that the slavery that is referred to within the auspices of the nation of Israel is referring predominantly, with rare exceptions, to indentured servitude. Okay? You see, we're so in our modern first world,
Oh yeah.
we're accustomed where people are not contractually obligated, where they can quit a job on the spot, right? But there are certain situations where you are contractually obligated to fulfill physical services, and if you don't,
You get sued.
you can be sued. For example, we have actors and actresses who sign a contract. The Hollywood studios do this all the time. When they hire you to do a part, a contract is written up, and it's specifically delineated what your performance is going to be. And if you fail to deliver that, you can be sued for it. There are other forms of contractually obligated service. Okay? And in biblical times, in those times, they refer to these people as servants or slaves.
It's like professional sports teams have team owners, but you wouldn't say like the players are slaves to the team owner, right? Like, it's kind of
Yeah,
like,
and the players are contractually obligated insofar as they're able to perform a service. And if they don't, they can be sued.
yeah. For example,
I also think all of this is a moot point, because if God is regulating slavery, even as the atheists envision it, it's God's world. He can assign the order he wants.
Good. I would
So I'm willing to say, like, yeah, it's exactly the way you said it was. It's based because God is in charge.
Right. So what all they're simply doing is, and you've made a really, really good point here, because even if the scenario is, as they claim, that the Old Testament is in broad strokes sanctioning antebellum type of or antebellum slavery, okay, where it's man stealing and forced servitude, okay, even though Christians generally wouldn't agree with that, even if that were the case, all they could simply and do you know why they're dwelling on this? Very little see.
That's why.
they want to say God's a
Yeah, thank you. That was good. Who just said that? Was that Mac or was that E-Bike?
That was me.
Mac.
Yeah, that was very good. It's, by the way, for those he said it's pearl clutching. Okay, so what pearl clutching is it's the idea that, you know, in modern times, like in the 20th century, where you have society is increasingly becoming decadent, okay, and somebody is behaving in a kind of inappropriate or risque fashion, you would have the older generation, especially older women, who would have pearls around their neck, who are horrified by scandalous, inappropriate behavior. They're clutching their pearls in horror and disgust. Okay, and so you are precisely right in saying that this is pearl clutching. What they're simply doing is because they don't have a strong case that the God of the Bible doesn't exist. Their go-to defeater is to say, well, this God that you purport is an awful person. He's terrible because he allowed slavery. And we all know how evil slavery is. So therefore, this God that you believe in, but you know what the funny thing is? These are the same people that support actions of pedophilia, such as grooming young children, or sexual, or mutilating their bodies, and through surgical procedures,
or abortion,
or abortion. These are these people are not consistent in their attacks.
they are just committed to the fashionable morality of the day.
I don't understand how
Exactly.
they can buy this narrative, because it's like God frees the Jews from slavery in Egypt, right? And then he turns around and is like, okay, now just enslave people. Like, how does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. But you see, the reason why they beat these tom-toms so regularly, like Josh Bowen, is because it's a cheap shot. If Josh Bowen had some type of tour de force rationale why God doesn't exist or why the God of the Bible doesn't exist, he'd give it. But you see, what he's just simply doing is because of he has, I think, a master's degree in Hebrew in the Old Testament, and he's an Assyriologist, deservingly so. Okay, he's using that as a way to just simply take a popular notion bashing the God of the Old Testament. Oh, your God is for slavery, and like it was either E-Bike or Max just said. All you're then just saying is, well, I don't like God's plan, therefore your God doesn't exist.
That's one of the things, guys, that when I come across atheists, they will bring that one. There's other points.
That's all they
One
got.
thing they bring
That's all
up.
they got. Other than they go, you see, they got tired of saying, your God committed genocide in the flood. That's all they've got. This is how pathetic they are. This is their only remaining go-to attack upon the triune God of the Christian scriptures.
They want
Is to go, go ahead.
they want to genocide Nazis. Like if there was a nation of Nazis out there, they'd be calling for the genocide of that culture. You know?
No, look, these people, they're pathetic. So, you know, if Josh Bowen has brass balls, and you'll forgive the figure of speech, but if he has these brass balls to write 2 books, on an atheist guide to the Old Testament, why is it that he absolutely failed miserably and he acted in complete cowardice when challenged to defend his atheism when he was dealing with a competent opponent? It's because he couldn't. Okay? That's why I don't take Josh Bowen seriously. And nor should anybody else. Look, if Josh Bowen is such a spineless jellyfish that when asked, give a defense of his atheism, when I encountered him when I had no mod powers, and he just says, oh, I don't like your attitude, then nobody should take him seriously. When he
Well, it's true.
book,
He doesn't like your attitude. Your attitude is one of asking him for justification. He doesn't like that.
You know another like atheist trope, or what is it, a cliche? They'll say like, oh, like God's racist because he has a chosen people. But it's like when I did research on that, just because you're chosen isn't like you could be chosen to do my laundry, right? That's not necessarily a good thing.
But listen. Every one of the attacks that the atheists have on the God of the Old Testament, it's about as sophisticated as a 15-year-old would come up with. Seriously.
Right, and like when you're chosen, God's chosen people, he's chosen you for like a terrible burden. Like it doesn't mean your life's going to be roses. It's like he's got these like plans for you.
Look, atheists will run these silly little childish, they're worse than childish arguments because they got nothing. Look, right now, do we have any atheists in the room? Anybody who rejects the notion of the existence of God, or you reject the notion of the existence of the Christian God, raise your hand. Come up and tell me. And I will guarantee you completely uninterrupted time. As long as you don't troll, you will have uninterrupted time. Raise your hand. Come on up. No, they're few and far between. They won't do it.
Come on.
They don't want to deal with anybody who is a biblical presuppositionalist who knows their BS. Welcome, Ekan. What would you like to say?
Good evening, everybody.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why are you on stage, Ekan?
Well, I've been listening to you for the past 30 minutes. And
Yeah, you're going to have to start all over. Microphone quality is not good.
okay, sorry. Give me 1 second. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
He said he's been listening to you for 13 minutes.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. What would you like to say?
Okay, so I've been listening to you for about 30 minutes now, and it seems like maybe this room or your room. I don't know the owner of the room, but it seems like the title is is to bash. I'm not an atheist, too, just for the record. I am not an atheist. I am an agnostic, but it seems like
Okay, we'll talk about that.
this room was just created by Christians to bash atheists. You know.
Yeah, you're correct. You are correct.
Okay. Me, I'm not.
Got 'em.
I'm not for that. I don't.
Of course, because you're an atheist.
No, I'm no, sir. I am not an atheist, sir. I'm not
So
an
you believe in God?
No, sir.
Okay. So you're claiming the legitimacy of God then?
Yes, I am an agnostic, sir.
Okay, so you're claiming the legitimacy of being neutral toward God. Is that correct?
My claim is different.
Hey, sir, I'm going to interrupt you here right now. I just asked you a crystal clear question. Are you claiming that you are suspending judgment as per the existence and non-existence of God? Are you claiming to be neutral?
What I am claiming is that.
Okay, sir.
Yes,
Stop.
something like that.
Good.
Hello,
Now,
please.
is that position okay? So you're affirming you are claiming to suspend judgment about the existence or non-existence of God. You're claiming to be neutral. Now,
no, I'm not saying. I never said that.
Talk me while I'm speaking. I will kick you from the room. Okay? Now, you are claiming neutrality toward the existence or non-existence of God. You are claiming to suspend judgment. Is that correct?
No, sir. That is not.
Sir, either you are affirming the existence of God, you're denying the existence of God, or you are suspending judgment as to the two previous propositions. Which are you doing? Affirming, denying, or suspending judgment?
I will say deny, but can I explain?
Okay, listen, sir. Having an intelligent conversation with you is like pulling teeth. Like that does. Are you affirming or denying the existence of God, or are you suspending judgment? Which of those three do you do?
Okay. I will say that I use the latter.
We're done. Okay. Yeah. What's your favorite color? Well, I love spaghetti.
Bishop just said I am not I'm reserving judgment. Like I don't know. Like at least I don't know.
Look, I'm not trying to be mean.
No.
But if you're going to come up here and somebody asks you a clear-cut question, and we get verbal gobbledygook back, whether or not, excuse me,
That's really good.
Did he die? Was he dead?
No, I'm not dead. Not yet. Not yet. Okay, hold on a second.
Did you say what's your favorite color? And then they respond, it's not spaghetti.
Yeah. This is the kind of bull crap that we get. Right? But I get this all the time. I ask people straightforward, circumspect questions, and what I get back is gobbledygook. And then people say I'm mean, I'm impatient. No, and then I repeat the question that they didn't answer, and then I get more gobbledygook. Right? Then I repeat the question a third time. Well, I'm sorry. If after I ask the question 3 times, all I get is verbal mashed potatoes, we're done. Okay? You're wasting my time. Okay, so we have Gary Agnostic in the room who likes to trash me in his text on his profile. Why don't you come up and explain to us in an intelligent fashion your objections to me in an adult fashion here. Why did you come on up? Let's see whether you're a coward or not. Come on up. Oh, bye-bye.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if his voice is strikingly similar to that of somebody we already know.
No, I just removed him. Here's a guy who wants to, in his text, tell me to F off, and he can't come up right now. Okay, bye-bye.
Yeah, I have that guy blocked. You notice he hasn't, if you look at his profile, he hasn't been on any stages.
That's not.
Yeah, one more thing. Yeah, I understand why Josh would want to say, I don't like your attitude. What else was he going to say? Was he going to say, well, I don't want to discuss it with you because I'm going to come out looking like a fool, which he did in the previous interaction. Okay, with no exaggeration, I have had 15 and 16-year-olds on Discord give a better defense of atheism than what Josh Bowen, after having earned a PhD in Assyriology, gave in an hour-long discussion. I was literally shocked at how inept his defense of atheism was, how abysmal it was. Now, I'm not just saying that I disagree with it. His defense of atheism could accurately and aptly be described as pathetic. Right? So here's a guy who decides he's going to write a book on an atheist guide to the Old Testament. Here's a guy who can't even defend his atheism, attacking the Bible.
Yeah, I actually saw that video, and I was trying to figure out, like if Josh Bowen could defend atheism, and you did good, Darth. It's like
I encourage any of you to go onto YouTube and Google Darth Dawkins versus Josh Bowen. Okay, PhD in Assyriology, and for over an hour, I was nothing but cordial, polite, patient, respectful, and his defense of atheism was beyond pathetic. I'm not just saying that I disagree with him. It was appallingly bad.
I only vaguely remember that conversation. Didn't he just say that Christianity's made up, or God is made up because there's a bunch of made up religions or something?
Yeah, that was the gist of what he had to say. But you see, that doesn't address the issue of his atheism.
Did he give a defense of how his atheism is not just another made up story, another made up idol?
No, he didn't. Okay, atheism does not equal Christianity as false. Now, atheism entails that Christianity is false, were it to be true. But atheism is not merely equal to Christianity as false. And whenever we encounter, okay, I'll be brief, you can speak in a second. Whenever I encounter atheists, for the most part, and I challenge them to give a rational defense of the truthfulness of atheism, what I get 8 times out of 10 is some type of verbalization that either that Christianity is false or that they don't accept it, Christianity. But you see, atheism does not equal that Christianity is false.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, Darth. When I see your interactions, everything, you are far more intelligent. You can hold up on your and then I would expect the opponent, the interlocutor, be present a challenge, but it can't.
I encountered Detroyer, who, when I spoke with him the other day, which I did not know it was him, and
did he give you a conceptual analysis?
Oh yeah, well that's an inside joke.
That was him, by the way, the conceptual analysis guy.
Yes, I remember correctly. Yeah, when I asked him to give me a defense why atheism is true, how does he show God doesn't exist? He said through a conceptual analysis. Well, that's not a non-informative response, and it was a purposeful dodge. When I asked him to explain why God doesn't exist, all he did was give me a generalization somehow that God's not needed, but he didn't support that contention. And when I repeatedly asked him to give a positive defense for that which fundamentally exists, which would equate to God cannot logically coexist, he couldn't give it. And look, I'm not being funny or hyperbolic about this. Detroyer, aka Friction Philosophy, when I spoke with him the other day on Clubhouse, was appallingly bad, and I finally had to remove him from the room because he was purposely being deceptive and not answering the question while pretending to do his Emmy Award-winning performance that he was answering the question when he was just simply being verbose. He was just simply yada, yada, yada. And he knew that he wasn't addressing the question. I knew it, and he knew that I knew he wasn't addressing the question.
I was thinking
This is a guy who claims he's philosophically oriented. These people are full of crap, right? People think I'm harsh. No, I'm not. I'm spot on with these people. They're full of crap.
You're right, Darth. Like I was even looking into conception and I don't know if that's the same word or another word, but it's like he didn't answer. It's like, well, there is something in the answer.
Well, I don't have a problem per se with saying I'm going to falsify God through a conceptual analysis. Okay, fine. But that's just rhetoric when it's not really, filling in the colors.
I noticed, I may mention this before, but I noticed that these people who hang out in this sort of Jack Angstreich circle always use phrases like they say, "Oh, I take it that," right? They say, "I take it that," and then they give a conclusion. But when they say, "I take it that," they're not taking it from you. They're just making an assertion of their own authority. But whenever they say "I take it," they're about to make an assertion that's a premise to whatever their conclusion is. But their taking of it is of their own origin. Like, for example, when they say, "Oh, I take it that a mind is some physical thing," right? But when you ask them how a mind can exist, how God can't be a mind, they're not getting it from you. They're not taking it from you that a mind has to be physical, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's a very good point. Just for the record, whenever Parakeet opens his mouth, aka the Toxic Avenger, he's always spot on. He has never failed to surprise me. In other words, your comment, and I'm not saying this to brown nose, to use that figure of speech, but you're always spot on. I wish I was that spot on every time I opened up my pie hole,
The atheists kind of, are you saying the flat earthers are trolling? They don't really believe it. The atheists kind of remind me of the same way. Kind of similar.
Oh, of course they are. Of course. Yeah, the vast majority of the atheists that we encounter on Clubhouse and Discord, in my biased opinion, the vast majority of them are trolls, and by trolls I mean in varying degrees they're engaging in deception and invasive and just pulling our chain. When they assert certain universal declarations that they know they couldn't possibly defend, and even defend it by their own criterion, that's a form of trolling, because they're not being honest. When they assert that God cannot and does not exist because what is universal and fundamental is just simply energy, and they just simply claim that energy per se, as a category of a plurality of discrete states that have similar characteristics, simply is what is eternal and fundamental, thereby excluding God. They couldn't possibly defend that. Let me ask anyone, either on the stage or in the audience, if you want to answer this. When an atheist says, well, God doesn't exist because what is eternal and fundamental is simply energy, how could you possibly defend that? Other than that that's a naked assertion.
There's a terrible atheist debater that's challenging you, but I don't even know if you want to deal with him.
Who is that?
Billy, he's like the vegan. I'm sure you know him.
Billy the homosexual? No, he's a stalker.
Yeah.
No, he's look. He wore out his welcome several years ago by not only being creepy beyond measure, but engaging in stalking behavior. Okay. Look, there's something mentally and emotionally, psychologically and spiritually wrong with Billy Martin.
I heard him debate Married Saint, and he got who is John? I don't think he wants us to say his last name
Is
anymore.
Billy? Oh, Billy's in the audience. Okay, bye, Billy. See you later. Bag.
He got destroyed by Married Saint like so hard it was like embarrassing for him. He like barely had a word. He couldn't even like respond.
Look. Listen. Contrary to criticisms that made of me, I don't use the word troll lightly. Okay.
What debate are you talking about?
Billy versus Married Saint.
Is that on YouTube? If I type that in.
I don't want to dox the guy. Doesn't want it, or maybe does he care? I don't know. It's Billy
Can you
versus.
just link me the debate, maybe?
I don't have it, but he got.
Okay.
You can just say
So what is it, Billy?
You can just say the name of the video without mentioning who it is on here.
I wouldn't know the name of the video.
It's the video. The video is titled Billy Martin versus John Lee.
Okay.
I want to welcome Steve Appel, a.k.a. Charlton Heston Moses, to the stage.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Garth. I want to say hello to Barth, E-Bike, Darth, all of the other peeps. I was scrolling my hallway looking for a room to come in, and I just wanted to say that although I am an atheist, I am not pathological, and I am definitely not a liar.
No, all atheists are liars, either to themselves or to others. Okay? Because to be an atheist is to embrace only of one of two propositions. To be an atheist, you must embrace your own autonomy. Okay? Now, do you accept that?
No, I do not.
Okay. So then when it comes to your own self-consciousness, your basic cognitive functioning, it will only be in one of two states. Now, if you want to reject what I'm about to say, you're going to have to offer a third alternative. So when you recognize the actuality of your cognition, your reason, it will either be in that your cognition is creaturely and hence and necessarily the mind and purpose of God is autonomous and your cognition is not. And if you reject that, then by default the only other option is that your cognition simply is without derivation of the autonomous mind of God, meaning that therefore your cognition would be by default autonomous.
I would prefer to go back, Darth, 1 minute, and just to paraphrase if I heard.
I asked you a question, Steve.
Okay, go ahead. Ask again, and I will answer.
The question was, you only have two alternatives. Either your cognition, your consecutive mental states are creaturely, and hence necessarily God's mind is autonomous, and your cognition is not. And if you reject that the mind of God is, that his mind is the autonomous one, and your mind and cognition is derivative, then the only other possible state is that your mind is autonomous. Okay? And there's not a third alternative. Because to be an autonomous mind simply means your mind simply is and operates not being derivative from some other ultimate source. So, do you accept and believe that you possess cognition?
Now I understand, and I believe I will take one of the two options, that my mind is autonomous. Yeah.
Okay. Now, how is that defensible?
I can defend the statement that my mind is autonomous because right now, at this very moment, I can choose to go left or I can choose to go right. I can choose to be respectful or I can choose to be disrespectful.
Okay, so you were telling us that your defense of your autonomy is rational and justified because you have the capacity of agency without respect to derivation and dependency upon the mind, the purpose, and the plan of God. How is agency real in a world without God? So, and let me clarify the question, right? When you claim to be autonomous as an agent in a God-free way, what you are claiming, whether you realize it or not, is that your cognition as a set is, I'm trying to figure out how to say this with clarity, that is characteristically the rational as opposed to being not rational. And I'm sure you would agree with that, right? That's characteristically.
Yeah, actually, Darth, I do not. What I claim.
All right, hold on a second.
Sure.
If I say to you, a rock is characteristically the not rational, whereas human beings, whether you agree with them or not, are characteristically the rational. Okay, that's what we're talking about here. Okay, it doesn't necessarily mean that an instance of cognition is rational or irrational. It just that means that we possess some characteristics of being the rational. Okay? Now, when you reject the notion that the mind of God being the rational and being autonomous, you consequently embrace that your mind is autonomous and the rational. Whether you realize it or not, you are therefore claiming, and you'll have to defend, that you being characteristically the rational derives from what fundamentally exists, which is the not rational. Okay? So your position, whether you've realized it in the past or not, is that the not rational, as to whatever is fundamental in terms of the totality of everything, will then beget in some way you, which are characteristically the rational, as opposed to you being a rock that is the not rational. Now, can you rationally defend that the not rational, which is fundamental to whatever is fundamental to everything, will beget and produce the rational, which is you? Can you defend that?
No.
Then the point is then your claim to autonomy is not something that's rational at all.
Well, I would invite everybody else in the room to just paraphrase what you said.
Is your claim to mental autonomy and that you are characteristically a rational entity, and that what is characteristically not a rational entity begets you, do you hold to you being an autonomous entity, do you hold to it rationally?
That would be up to you, my friend.
No, it's up to you. I'm asking you, when you proclaim your own autonomy, do you proclaiming it in an absurd way that there's no rational basis to it, or do you hold to your autonomy in that it is rationally defensible?
Yes, I hold that my autonomy is rational. Yes, I do.
No, do you? Okay, the question is your self-proclaimed would-be autonomy, is it rationally defensible?
Yes.
Good. Now, in order to, you said that it is rationally defensible. Now,
yes.
What is it that is fundamental to all states of affairs is that which is fundamental to all states of affairs, including your cognition, is that characteristically the rational or the not rational?
I don't know.
Well, the answer is it would have to be the not rational, because you reject the notion that God is. If what is fundamental to everything is characteristically the rational, that's what we call God. But you don't accept that. So the only alternative is therefore what is fundamental to everything, including your cognitive states, is characteristically the not rational. Now, when I say that which is fundamental is characteristically the not rational, I am not saying at this juncture that you holding to that is irrational. I'm using the word rational in two different senses in this conversation. That's why I add the qualifier characteristically. So God, as a concrete entity in one worldview, God would be characteristically the rational. Now, in an alternative model of reality, which you may hold to, you might believe that energy in a plurality of states is what is fundamental to all other temporal states. But that you wouldn't hold that the energy in its set is it's in itself characteristically a conscious, rational entity. Right? Now, because if you did, that's what we call God. Now, so you must believe that what is fundamental to all temporal states is not a rational being, is it?
Well, I'll go back to where the conversation started 5 minutes.
Do you accept that there is something that is fundamental to all temporal states?
I need to think about it for a moment. I don't know.
Okay. So if you don't hold to that, then what you're going to be left with is that there are temporal states which are without something fundamentally deriving it. So there would be no reason why certain temporal states happen. It just happened for no real reason. Not that it's unknown. Just things would just happen. Do you believe that there are events that happen for no real reason?
No, I don't agree with you.
Okay, so then you're going to have to believe that there's going to have to be something that's fundamental.
Oh, okay.
Whether that's God per se as a concrete singular, or if you believe that there is a plurality of discrete states, such as energy packets. Okay? Now,
What's fundamental could also be called the final reason why anything happens.
So if what is fundamental, whether it's singular or plural, whatever that fundamental state consists of, that fundamental state will either be characteristically possessing the capacity of rationality or not. So, for example, a rock is not characteristically the rational. It's not irrational to believe that there is a rock, but a rock per se is not characteristically the rational. Would you agree with that?
I don't know.
I just gave you a really simple analogy here. A rock is not characteristically the rational. A rock is not considered to be possess a mind.
I agree that a rock does not possess a mind.
Okay, so we could say that you and I, Steve, characteristically can be constituted as the rational, as opposed to a rock, which is characteristically not the rational. The rock does not possess the characteristic of being rational. Right? This is real simple.
Yes, I agree that a rock does not possess a mind. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, but I want to use these terms for clarity and specificity. So, the rock on the side of the road is not characteristically identified as the rational. It's characteristically the not rational. Doesn't mean that it's irrational to believe it or not. It just means characteristically it doesn't possess the attribute of being rational. Right?
Right.
So God, by definition, we're not defining God into existence. God, by definition, in a world where he is, he would be characteristically possessing what we call a rational state. But if you don't believe in God, whatever you do believe in to fill that void as to what is fundamental would be characteristically possess a state of being not a rational entity or being. It would putatively exist, but it would not be characteristically possessing a rational state. So you believe, when you claim to be autonomous, and that it is rationally defensible, that means it's incumbent upon you to defend that what is fundamental and characteristically not being a rational entity will beget you as a rational entity. That is your position.
My position is that I can defend that I am autonomous.
Okay. Do you understand that that is your position? That whatever you believe to be fundamental is characteristically not possessing a state of rationality.
No.
Then
no.
Oh, so then what is fundamental characteristically is a rational being?
No, I can defend that I'm autonomous, which is where...
No, you're not. You're dodging the question. Do you hold that whatever your cognition as a set derives from fundamentally, is whatever that is it characteristically possessing and being a rational entity, or is it an entity that is fundamental but it's not characteristically a rational entity or being? Well, the answer is that is your position. Your position is that what is fundamental is not a rational, singular, concrete being. So your position is what is fundamental and characteristically not a rational being will beget a rational being. That is your position. I'm not putting words in your mouth. That's your position. Are we clear?
No.
Okay. Do you hold that your mind is eternal and without fundamental derivation?
I don't know.
Okay. Is your mind derivative?
I don't know.
Okay, so then you have no knowledgeable rational defense as to why your rational state exists now.
I maintain that I am autonomous, which is where this conversation
Yeah, you're maintaining that you're autonomous on a rational basis.
Yes.
What is the rational basis?
Yes.
What is the rational basis that your mind is in fact rational? Is your mind rational?
Thank you so much for asking me the question. I would love to answer right now. That's a great question. Thank you.
Fundamentally,
do you want the answer? Do you want the answer to your question?
Yes, I will.
Okay, then I'll give you the answer.
Steve, what fundamentally begets you, the rational?
You asked me a direct question. I would like the opportunity to give you a direct answer.
I'm waiting.
Thank you. Darth, I'm here in my kitchen right now. Please request whether I move one step to the left or one step to the right.
You're not answering the question.
Oh, yes, I am.
No,
here, tell you what then. I'll answer it another way.
There's something fundamental in the set of all
you asked me a direct question.
Steve, stop dodging. I'll repeat the question and I will shut up. What fundamentally exists in the set of all real things that eventually will produce you as the rational?
I was specifically asked whether or not I am autonomous and why I've tried to answer.
Steve, please answer the question you're asking.
Sure, go ahead. Ask me a question. I'll give you a direct.
What is it that is fundamental in terms of the set of all real things that will eventually beget or produce you, the rational?
I don't know.
So you don't have a fundamental rational explanation as to how you're rational then?
I can answer that in regards to my autonomy, which is where the
your autonomy is like claiming that you are a licensed driver, and then when the state trooper goes back to his vehicle and he runs your driver's license, he comes back and he says it's expired. You're not a licensed driver. You are claiming that you can articulate what fundamentally will then produce you as the rational. Can you defend what is fundamental that begets the rational?
No.
Good. Then you don't have a rational defense that you are an autonomous being.
If you say so, sir.
No, it necessarily follows. You don't have a rational defense as to what specifically and clearly, fundamentally, will produce events, including the events that we're referring to you as being an autonomous, rational mind. You told me you could rationally defend it, but now you're telling me you don't know what it is that your so-called rational, autonomous mind originates from, do you?
I can rationally prove I'm autonomous.
No. Okay, sir.
What? Okay.
Is there something fundamental that begets you, the rational?
When the conversation started 10 minutes ago, I was asked if I could prove...
You're dodging again. As always, you're dodging.
Well, I've answered 25
Is there something that fundamentally begets you, the rational?
You've asked me over 25 questions. I've done my best to answer all.
So you're going to dodge again. Thank you for wasting my time, Steve.
Okay.
Thank you for wasting my time. Well, I'm going to move Steve back to the audience. This is his shtick that he does all the time. Don't mean any disrespect. Let me just finish. This is what he does. I've made the question very clear. I've reiterated. I've qualified it again. I've expressed it in different terms, and he keeps on saying, well, I can rationally defend my autonomy. It's good. I want you to start with what is it that is fundamental that will ultimately beget or produce him as the rational. And his answer was clear. He says he doesn't know. So he doesn't have a rational defense as to what fundamentally will produce him as a rational autonomous mind. So therefore, his so-called, let me just say this, his claim that he can rationally defend that he is a rational autonomous mind is vaporware. It doesn't exist.
Well, what he's doing is he's confusing his confidence that he's rational with an actual justification that he's rational.
Right.
So in a sense, what he's doing, well, let me finish. In a sense, what he's doing, I only have a second to talk anyway, so that's why I want to spit it out. Then I have to go back to work. But what he's doing, in a sense, in terms of his reasoning, is he's like a witch doctor type who thinks that he's doing a rain dance and causing the rain. And you say to the witch doctor, well, what's the rational justification that your rain dance causes the rain? And he says, well, look, I'm doing it. I'm doing it. Watch, I'm doing it. I'm doing it. I'm dancing and I'm causing the rain. I'm doing it. And you say, no, just because you think you're doing it doesn't mean you're actually doing it. What's the justification that that's actually occurring? What institutes that that's the case? He says, well, look, I'm doing it. I'm doing it. I'm really doing it. I'm really confident I'm doing it.
Yeah, what he's doing is he's spewing out certain proximate relations to his cognition. But I'm not asking him for proximate explanations. I'm asking what fundamentally, what rudimentarily in the set of all real things will eventually beget him as a discrete state being characteristically the rational.
Well, the only honest answer for atheists is I don't know.
Well, that's what he did say. He said he did not know. Therefore, he has no fundamental rational defense of his autonomy. Simply verbalizing certain proximate situations is not a fundamental rational defense that rationality exists. Notice,
When he
again
says
and
he's
again,
doing it, when he says he's being rational, the question is he being rational? Is he?
No, he's not. Look, this is why I entitle the room "Atheists are Pathological Liars." Now, sometimes they will.
We think he's
lie.
rational, but he can't explain how he's rational, Darth.
Well, I think that I think that characteristically he is a rational being, but that doesn't mean that the rational being itself in any particular instance is quote unquote being rational in terms of thought. Okay? So him being a rational entity, a being, is not in question here. The question is, what fundamentally exists both chronologically and contemporarily as to beget or to produce what he considers to be a rational, autonomous state. So if you reject belief that God is what is ultimate, what is fundamental, and being characteristically a rational being who then begets a creation and then imbues in some of those states to either possess or not possess being characteristically a rational being, if you don't accept that, then your only other scenario that you're operating from is that there is something fundamental which characteristically is not to be reckoned to, or to possess being a rational being such as God, and that this non-rational state, or what the fundamental state not possessing being a rational entity, will beget him or her as being a rational entity. So what they're saying is the non-rational fundamental will beget certain states that are rational. Well, how is that rationally defensible? Well, the answer is it isn't. How does what is characteristically the not rational or not a rational being, how does that fundamental state eventually, through, if you will, time or the progress of events, how does that come about that there is a rational entity being autonomous? How does that work? The answer is they have no defense of it other than repeating the same claim by saying human autonomy or rationality is an emergent property of evolution, which is just simply a restatement of the same claim. By the way, if anyone would like to come up and give a rational defense of atheism and not troll and lie through your teeth, you're welcome to come up, and I will guarantee you uninterrupted time, as long as you are transparently answering. But you see, when most atheists encounter such a rigorous analysis of their position, they don't want to come up because they're scared. Because their usual cliches and slogans and rhetoric that they pull out of their American atheist canvas tote bag don't work. You're not dealing with some naive Christians there. Here. So, do we have any intelligent, non-lying atheists? Jimmy, why don't you come up? We talked with the other day. Come on up, Jimmy. Jimmy's a nice guy. How are you doing, Jimmy?
Thank you so much for the invite. You and I started conversing a couple of nights ago, and I'm kind of new at this, and all of a sudden, right in the middle of our conversation, my iPhone decided to reboot or update firmware, whatever it is. I'm a 50s child. This technology is well beyond me. But anyway, after about 10 minutes,
hold on a second. What time of day was it for you?
It was about 9 o'clock at night.
Really? Wow. Because I don't. Yeah. On my phone, it never updates that early. It usually waits till I go to sleep.
Yeah, it's the first time in the history of history that I've ever experienced that. But here's the situation. About 10 minutes worth, I got back on and I couldn't find you. I couldn't find the room. I'm thinking, that was a crowded room. How did it all evaporate in 10 minutes? I could not find you. I could not find the
Okay.
room.
Well, probably because I couldn't find any intelligent unbelievers to talk to. By the way, Jimmy, tap on my icon and then click follow. That way you'll know when I'm on.
Excellent. Excellent.
And
Yeah.
also, okay, tap on my icon.
Yeah, I did that. I'm following you.
Okay, but now, but do it again. To the
Okay.
left of following, you should see a bell.
Okay.
Click the bell touch the bell with your finger, and it should say always, sometimes, or never ever.
Okay.
And click always, and that way you'll be notified when I'm on.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
No
I
problem.
appreciate that. So here's the situation. What you and I started before I was really interrupted by technology is I don't consider myself an intelligent.
Okay, let's not go there again because I corrected you on that. Okay, you stop with the self-disparagement. Okay, you sound like an intelligent man to me. So go ahead.
No, I was going to make an actual point. The point is that I am honest, even though I'm inexperienced in face-to-face dialogue. That's or
Fine,
over
no
the phone.
problem.
That's all. That's the only point that I wanted to make. I don't suffer from low self-esteem.
That's fine. And you know what? When somebody is being transparent to you, I'm willing to even go much slower the discussion because I don't have a history with you like I do so many of these other atheists where they pathologically evade and dodge like you heard with Steve Appel. I mean, he's a master double talker. So.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you've been debating. I think the number's like 12 years, 10 years, something like that.
13 years.
Okay, so and the immediate thing that popped in my mind whenever you mentioned that is, what in the world could I ever explain or question that you haven't heard a million times? So I really don't. I really don't know what in the world that I can bring to the table, and that's why, I'm kind of shy in the room because I just don't want to waste your time. I also want to kind of gain a little bit of knowledge about where you're.
If you don't want a dialogue on this, I'm more than happy to let you just listen. But if you want a dialogue, I'll just have some questions.
Yeah, go ahead and ask some questions. I'm very interested.
Okay, so I think the last time around, you expressed that you stake out a position of neutrality toward the existence and non-existence of God. Is that correct?
Yeah. In other words, I think from my limited knowledge of dictionary terms, I classify myself more of an agnostic. But
okay. Well, the view I take on that, and you're free to disagree, is that agnosticism is an empty claim and actually can be refuted that nobody is neutral toward God. Either one will choose to affirm directly or indirectly that God is the necessary precondition of all things. In other words, we will be invoking facts with reference to the necessity of God, or we will invoke facts without referencing the necessity of God, and that there's not a third option. So let me repeat that again. When we invoke facts or states of affairs, it will either be explicitly or implicitly with reference to the necessity of God, being the creator or ultimate precondition, or one will invoke facts by choice without referencing the necessity of God, and that there's not a third alternative.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, basically, what you're saying is that God is either real or not real.
If you agree with that, then the verbal claim of neutrality no longer holds. That the refusal and I don't mean that in a bad way, to affirm the necessity of God as creator or ultimate precondition. The refusal is a de facto default form of either direct or indirect denial of God's necessity. So agnostics deny God by virtue of their refusal to affirm the necessity of God, but while verbally maintaining they're not denying God. They're denying God while claiming they're not denying God.
Can I ask you an honest question about this? And I'm sure that you've heard this millions of times before, but it's just curious. I'm following what you're saying, but I can equate this in the back of my mind with Russell's teapot kind of thing. It's like Russell's teapot may be out there floating around somewhere in the cosmos. And it could be a fact that teapot is floating out there. Mm-hmm. And my position is, I will basically, I feel kind of strange by just accepting the fact that this teapot is out there without any, justification, I guess is the word, or any cause. You see the parallel, what I'm saying?
Yeah, yes, I do.
Okay.
Okay, so are you done?
Yeah, I think I am.
Okay, because you're a nice guy. I want to make sure I bend over backwards to be patient and everything else. Okay, so what Jimmy's referring to is Russell's teapot. He's referring to the brilliant philosopher in the 20th century, Bertrand Russell. Bertrand Russell was a brilliant philosopher in terms of philosophy and mathematics. There's no doubt about it. But he came up with the idea that he either disbelieved and denied believing in God in the same sense that somebody, and I may botch this a little bit, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Jimmy, that he doesn't disbelieve in God in the same way that he disbelieves in a teapot orbiting a planet in the way that he has no positive reason to believe that it exists. Would that be correct from your point of view?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, as brilliant as Bertrand Russell was, and I personally think intellectually, I don't even hold a candle to this guy. He was a very brilliant man. But he was mistaken, because in spite of his philosophical and mathematical brilliance, he made a blunder of an analogy. Because God is not merely some other temporal object that we don't have a positive reason to believe in. God would be within the category of not a mere temporal object that we have an absence of positive reason to believe in, but God would be characteristically the ultimacy of reality, the ground of all being from which all things derive and depend from what we would call a metaphysical or ontological basis. So, drawing an analogy between disbelieving in God and likening it to a teapot is a false analogy on the part, a mistake on Bertrand Russell's part. Okay.
I'm assuming that you believe in it, and I don't mean to insult you with this question. By all means,
feel free. You're good so far.
Thank you. You believe in the God of the Bible. You're a Christian. Yes. New Testament, Old Testament. You believe that you believe in the literal translations of the verses.
I believe that everything that the Bible affirms to be historically true is true, such as the Genesis account, the flood, Moses parting the Red Sea, things like that. Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to know who I was talking with. That's it. I mean, I didn't want to assume that.
I want to shout out to Tippy Bear, one of my favorite people on Clubhouse. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I just had to do that because she's such a nice lady. Go ahead, Jimmy.
I also like Tippy Bear.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me up. God bless you all.
Thank you, Tippy. Go ahead, Jimmy.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So, no problem at all. I don't mind interruptions. But So I'm a little bit confused. You say, and I'm trying to wrap my mind around it. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just trying to wrap my mind around this. So you're saying,
Jimmy, I'm good with you. So far, you've not shown that I have any reason to consider you trollish. We may vehemently disagree, but I'm good with you so far. Okay, so
thank you. That means a lot to me, Doc. I appreciate that. Giving me the benefit of the doubt. Appreciate it. So I am a little bit confused because you were saying that it's a false analogy because the teapot, Russell's teapot, is basically a physical particular item, and you were comparing that with and I don't want to put words in your mouth, I may misquote you, some metaphysical God. So because of the differences of their makeup or their characteristics or something, it's a false analogy. That's where I'm having a little bit of difficulty, because I'm kind of thinking that whatever you define God to be, it would be classified as an entity, right?
Yes, but it would not be limited to that. Okay, so when we talk about God, we're not just talking about an eternal mind, although that's included. When we invoke that God is in actuality or conceptually, we're also talking about a comprehensive model of reality. Right? And we could call that the creator-creature distinction, in that there is the eternal creator, who is the only thing that is in and of itself necessary and doesn't have any preconditions or precursors, from which all other things derive and depend. So when we invoke that God is, in actuality or in a conceptual framework, we're not just talking about an entity that has unimaginable powers or is in a unique category or classification all by itself. It also entails a complete worldview, and hence the creator-creature distinction. There's God, and then everything else constitutes his creation, and that creation derives ultimately from God, both chronologically and contemporarily. So God is both to be referred to not only as an entity, but as a worldview. I like to characterize that as the God world. Okay? Because if you don't use that type of vernacular, then it's easy for people to misconceive where God is simply just conceived of as an unimaginably powerful and knowledgeable mind that may or may not get you if you don't love him. But such an entity doesn't necessarily include the creator-creature distinction. So when I'm talking about God, I'm talking about where God is characteristically it's the God world. Okay? As opposed to the not God world. So Bertrand Russell was not dealing with God in terms of that it's a comprehensive worldview, rather than he's thinking of God merely as a mere entity, rather than God as an entity also comprises a complete worldview. Okay, so when I invoke God, that God is, I'm actually invoking the God world. That everything in the world that is not God ultimately derives and depends upon God. And that the not God world, meaning that there are a plurality of things, none of which derive from God being ultimate. So we either have the God world or the not God world. But you see, a teapot, being a temporal state, in and of itself does not comprise a worldview. It's just a temporal state. So Bertrand Russell is conflating a temporal state with a worldview.
To phrase it differently, when we're talking about God, all other states of affairs or facts that are not God have a conceptual link to God by necessity.
An
They don't have a
ontological link.
conceptual link.
Yeah.
That's correct. They don't have an ontological or conceptual link by necessity to a teapot.
Okay.
So when you talk about
So-
milk in a refrigerator, if you're low on milk in your refrigerator, that's going to indicate or be linked conceptually and ontologically to God. But it wouldn't be to some teapot that's floating out there.
Okay, so do you understand Bertrand Russell's mistake, Jimmy?
The way you describe it, I am wrapping my mind around it a little bit, but I'll be honest with you, I'll need a little bit more time
I agree
to
with
really
you.
let it absorb.
It's not something that is easily digestible. It's like studying any particular area. You have to ruminate it on over a number of times, and then it starts clicking with you as any subject matter. So just think of it this way. When we talk about God as creator, that includes a worldview, the God world. Okay? God, if we invoke that God is, either in actuality or in a conceptual discussion, what we are talking about is a comprehensive model of reality, where God is the only thing that is necessary, where God is eternal, and everything else derives and depends upon God. So that is a world view, meaning it's all-encompassing. So God equals the God world. Okay?
Another way to put it would be if God exists, then everything else has something to do with God.
Right.
Because it all comes from God.
If we're not talking, when we invoke and discuss God, whether explicitly or implicitly, if we're not including the idea of the God world, wherein God is the ultimate precondition of all things that are not himself, then we're just talking about another temporal entity, or entity that is not ultimate. So if Bertrand Russell is talking about God conceptually, wherein God is the ultimate, and that precludes anything else as being a necessary precondition, then he has a problem then, because believing or not believing or disbelieving in a teapot is not a worldview. It's just a mere temporal state.
I'm beginning to see it more and more clear, and I appreciate your patience with and you've stated it in different ways and emphasized it in other ways that it's making more and more sense instead of just repeating the same sentences over and over again. I appreciate that. I would like to ask you a favor of you. I wrote this was maybe about a month or two ago. I got it on a Word document in front of me. But I wrote a little bit of a hypothetical dialogue, and it would take maybe about 90 seconds to go through, but it will save a lot of time.
No problem. Take your time. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So here it goes. The following is a hypothetical dialogue between a spiritualist and a naturalist. I consider myself a methodological naturalist, by the way, to illustrate a common theme that I have encountered with Christians in the recent past. The setting is thousands of years ago, and it takes place after two men just witnessed a meteor burning up in the Earth's atmosphere. The spiritualist says, "See, there it is again. That's another fire-breathing dragon. I'm telling you, they're real." The naturalist says, "Sorry, but I just don't believe in mythological animals. There must be a natural explanation for what we are seeing." The spiritualist says, "Look, the evidence for the existence of fire-breathing dragons is right in front of you. Why can't you accept it? And besides, what's your explanation for what we just saw?" The naturalist says, "I don't have a natural explanation, but there's no reason to posit anything supernatural just because we don't know. The spiritualist says, then you must agree my explanation is logical and cohesive, right? The naturalist says, yes. I agree that your explanation for the existence of fire-breathing dragons is logical and cohesive, but that doesn't mean it's true and real. And I am seeking truth. It's just that I'm hopeful that someday in the future, the mystery of what we just witnessed will be solved. But for now, I have no reason to ascribe to anything supernatural. The spiritualist then says, then you admit that you are relying on faith. Faith that sometime in the future the solution will be found and it is not supernatural. It seems that being a naturalist requires a lot of faith. The naturalist says, well, yes, only if you define faith as confidence. It's like saying that I have confidence my chair will support me when I sit on it. However, it doesn't require anything supernatural to have faith in that way. And I believe that it's okay to say that we currently don't know the answer to all life's questions. However, to me, theism, there is no unsolved real mysteries out there. You can simply say, hey, God is responsible for this, and end of story. And that's the end. And that pretty much, yeah, that pretty much kind of solidifies, you know, what my questions and what my position is and everything. And I appreciate your patience.
Well, the problem is that although the naturalist doesn't have a positive reason to believe that there's a fire-breathing dragon spewing out that flaming phenomenon, which is fine, but nor do they have an explanation for any natural phenomenon. Any more than you can be hanging and not fall into the Grand Canyon when you're holding on to a chain when the uppermost link isn't attached to anything. It doesn't matter that you have subsequent proximate links connected to one another and you're holding on the bottommost links. If the uppermost link is not attached to anything, you're not hanging on to anything. So the naturalist has no explanation whatsoever. All he's doing is stringing a series of proximate explanations that come from nowhere. So the naturalist thinks that he's in a virtuous position when he doesn't accept the fire-breathing dragon, and he may well be warranted in objecting that he doesn't have a good reason to believe in a fire-breathing dragon, but nor does he have a good reason to believe in a naturalistic explanation for anything.
So, did you read my message, Darth? It's a presumption of naturalism that's being presented.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just checked my messages. I wasn't looking at the screen. So you see, the naturalist is adopting a position of absurdity without either recognizing or realizing that their position is absurd from the outset. So let me give you an analogy here. Do you know who Lawrence Krauss is?
Yes, I do know who Lawrence Krauss is.
Okay, I had the delight of speaking with him on one occasion, and during an AMA, he bragged that we don't need God. We can explain everything through the laws of nature. Okay? Now, to assert that we do not need God is the equivalent of asserting that God does not exist, whether or not the person making that assertion is aware of it. Okay? Do you agree with that?
I'll go with it for now.
Well, if God existed, you'd need him.
God, by definition, ontologically and conceptually, defined as the necessary precondition of all things that are not himself, whether or not you believe that God is. Okay? So by definition, God is defined as being the singular, concrete, necessary precondition. Now, in giving that definition, I'm not defining God into existence and then saying, well, then you have to believe in God. I'm simply saying is God is defined as being the final, fundamental, necessary thing. Okay? So if somebody says, we don't need God, we can explain everything without God, such an assertion, philosophically and logically, is equivalent. Look, if I invoke that God is, that's a universal declaration in that God is that which is ultimate and the creator and the source and basis of why anything at all exists that is not God. It's a universal declaration. To reject such a notion is to directly or indirectly make a universal declaration in the negative. Okay? And universal negations are also statements of universal positivity, depending on how it's phrased and vice versa. Okay? So if I say that God is, or if I say God is not, both propositions can be formulated as a universal negation. They can both be represented in a universal positive. So when we invoke that God is as a statement of universality, whether it's put in the positive or negative form, the only way that we can do so that is defensible is if we make an appeal that God existing and being perfect has taken the initiative to reveal himself in such a way in creation and human history that is undeniable and irrefutable. That's the only way that it can be done. Any other way that does not include that cannot actually instantiate that God is. Now, when that is rejected, the atheist himself, whether they realize it or not, is making a proposition of a universal scope. They're making a universal declaration, whether it's stated in the positive or negative. Now, when we assert the universal declaration that God is, whether it's stated in the positive or the negative, we only do so because God reveals himself. Well, that's our position, whether or not the atheists accept that. So since they don't believe that which is fundamental to all temporal states is a mind and that has the characteristics to reveal and enable us to know that it exists, by what means can somebody ground that such a universal state is? They couldn't. And yet they continue to lie to themselves and to others, and that's why the title of the room is Atheists Are Pathological Liars, because such a universal declaration that there is no God, or that all things that can and do exist with independence from God, how is that going to be established? Okay? Now, some of them will say, well, we say that, a God with omni properties is contradictory. Well, so be it. But the point is your notion of God's omni properties isn't necessarily true. Right? Nor is it a defeater that there is and what is ultimate is a mind that may or may not have omni properties. Is this Brenda the transvestite?
Oh no, I'm transgender.
Okay, bye-bye. You're a troll. See you later.
No, I'm not a troll.
Okay, all right, I feel sorry for that guy on Judgment Day. They think by repeating the same rhetoric, I'm not a transvestite, I'm transgender, that if they repeat it enough times, we're just gonna capitulate. Okay? Well, some people are, like Budweiser is doing it, and other companies. Oh yeah. And the reason they're not actually doing this because they're supportive of this, they're doing it out of fear from the LGBT Stapo,
Yeah. The plus.
Now, I'll repeat that again, the LGBT Stapo.
Gestapo?
Yeah, the funny thing is that dude who was just in here, who is living delusional that he's a female when he's not, is a guy who has repeatedly trolled and stalked and harassed and has repeatedly lied. Like, for example, Brendan, as I call him, has repeatedly stated on more than a dozen occasions that scientists, individually and collectively, do not presuppose the regularity of nature in any shape or form, which is an outright lie. Of course they do. Right? Now, some scientists may make the caveat, as I have seen, like Leonard Susskind, who's a brilliant physicist, and I'm trying to remember, there's another physicist. I think his name is Lee. What's his name? I can't remember what his name is. He was
Lee Harvey Oswald.
No, not Lee Harvey Oswald. Lee, something like Schwalman, or I can't remember what his name is. He did an interview on Closer to Truth, which is on PBS and on YouTube, where he said, the laws of nature may not be uniform elsewhere in the universe or in a multiverse, but that is not the same thing as in a general sense in our day-to-day operations, looking through microscopes and telescopes and things like that, that they don't presuppose the locality of a uniformity. Right? So Brendan is just, he's a troll who just said, he loves saying he's not a troll. When he knows he is a troll. So,
yeah, people call him.
It's just like when Joe Biden comes up there and he pretends that he's an honest politician when he's been a pathological liar his whole political career.
It's not even that there's, quote, biological male pretending to be a female is going to locker rooms. The female, like, the active biological. And then
Let's do a shout out to Johnny Hawes, who's in the audience, who is an apologetic whore, who, because he craves attention, he gives the seat or floor of discussing things with atheists and people on Clubhouse that he knows engage in slander, defamation, trolling, stalking, and harassing, and yet he continues them to be treated as though they're dignified persons. Shout out to Johnny Hawes, who is an apologetic whore in the audience. Okay. So, do we have any other atheists or unbelievers who would like to come forward? If not, anyone have any questions on atheism and dealing with atheists, you can raise your hand and come on up. We can discuss those issues. So, see, this is all we can get. We get, that last guy, what was his name again? I can't believe I forgot his name. Not Brendan, the guy before him.
Oh,
his name? The nice guy.
Jimmy. Yeah,
Jimmy is a good guy. Jimmy seems to be very transparent, very earnest. But other than isolated instances like that, all we get are atheist trolls, okay? Because if they don't troll to one degree or another, what do they got? They got nothing, right? All right. I'm going to take a break. We'll be back shortly. Okay, and as Austin Powers would say, behave.
She also said, "That's a man, baby."
Yeah, that's the thing when I saw this.
You can probably do that joke these days. Probably get canceled for doing that joke.
Yeah, like the what's that? What's Thomas? The trans? What's it? Nia Thomas? Yeah, Nia Thomas. I mean, you got how should I put this? You got these biological males showing their privates in women's locker room, and when colleges, companies go woke and they don't do nothing, they just, oh man, I can't.
I tried to type apologetic whore in the chat, and it warned me that I could get suspended for saying that, but then it let me say apologetic slut. What's the